Hello, everybody, and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic, and good morning, Asgard, episode number 38, where today I will be giving my thoughts on the Orville, Season 3. I mentioned this last night on the Welcome to Asgard podcast stream, and I figured I would do a dedicated segment on the morning show today to my thoughts about the season thus far. I'll also be giving my thoughts on the atrocious monstrosity that is Miss Marvel, as well as our friends over at Bounding Into Comics have reported on commentary made by the creators of the show as to why the show is not a major hit, why there are people who are being critical of it, and boy oh boy, the excuses for this show and the excuses by the creators, much like it is for most creators when their projects are either rejected or criticized that happen to have other types of woke agenda items plethoraed throughout them. Yes, I made up that word, plethoraed throughout them. It is something that is worth calling out and pointing out, and so we'll talk about that today as well as our general movie box office discussion as we typically have on the channel. So before any further, though, please make sure you smash that like button, light up that fire button if you're watching on Odyssey, and let's say hello to some people in the chat. We got Segev Segal. What's going on, Segev? Welcome back to the channel. He tags to say, am I the only one who thinks the scene with the kids getting the power in Thor makes no sense? Yes. It absolutely makes no sense. Very, very good point. It is a power that did not exist prior that just randomly comes into existence. Now, I'm sure that maybe there is, I'm not a comics person, so I don't know the history. Maybe there is a reference to this power existing in some or to some extent in the comics, whether it's old comics or new comics. That is, I think, something that I leave for the comic experts out there. But as far as what they presented in the films, right, just looking at the films, just looking at the canon that has been developed through the films, that is something that has never been even remotely indicated by any means, right? As far as the power of Thor, it's whoever shall hold this hammer, if he shall be worthy, shall possess the power of Thor. That is the only aspect of the power of Thor, that Thor's power has ever had in the realm of the actual films. And so it just definitely seems like this random, I guess you could say Deus Ex Machina, right? This random act of God, or in this specific instance, act of a, fictional Norse god character who is somehow able to give this power to others because they are somehow all worthy since they are Asgardian. I mean, that is basically the mindset, or that's basically the argument that they'll probably try and push. But yeah, it seemed like a moment where, and this is where it goes back to the major issue with that film, which is Taika Waititi's ego, which is like, oh, I can do whatever I want, and oh, I don't need to explain it. I don't need to explain it at all. I mean, this kind of goes back to his general demeanor of, I'm going to rock your mythos, right? I'm going to, mess up your mythos, baby. Just you sit and wait. And yeah, not only is he messing with the mythos of the character of Thor, but also making really obscure story and character choices that don't make even any sense within the context and framework of his own series of Thor films, this now being the second, or within any of the other Thor films either. JKD Buck 76, hail to you, good sir. He is a member saying, I'll listen, but I haven't seen any of the things mentioned in the title of today's stream. Well, as you all know, JKD Buck, it's always something where even if there is nothing in the title of the video that is necessarily connected with anything that you've been watching or that you know about, you know that there's always going to be things related to the content that's going to be cause for discussion. So great to have you here back again, JKD Buck 76. It's always great to hear your commentaries. He adds on to say, the only Orville I'm familiar with is Redenbacher with lots of butter and salt, popped to perfection on the stove. Oh, you're one of the stove poppers, eh? Not one of the microwave poppers. Yeah, I like the extra butter, the Orville extra butter. Really, any of the brands, extra butter is always a good thing. It's always very delicious. Great to have it while watching a show or while watching a movie. And so last night we were able to talk a little bit about my going through of Star Trek DS9. I am now into episode 8 or 9 of season 6. So I did my thoughts about season 5 last night. And in that discussion during that discussion, the Orville came up because I thought that there were moral choices specific to season 5, especially when it comes to Children of Time, which is the episode in DS9 when they find a planet where they find 8,000 people, 8,000 humans who happen to be descendants of the DS9 crew. And they find out it's because during that trip to said planet, they hit a anomaly, a temporal anomaly that forces them back 200 years in time, and they are marooned there, and therefore they have to make a life for themselves. And in that discussion of that episode, there was a similar moral scenario, or at least for me, a similar moral scenario about the value of human life, right? The dignity and value of human life, and a relation to a choice and a different philosophical framework presented in the series of the Orville, specifically in this most recent episode of the show, episode 6, which is twice in a lifetime, because basically a decision is made in that episode to erase people from existence. And how that contrasts with DS9's attempt to preserve human life, attempt to preserve the way in which time has played out, to preserve the way in which events in that time, in the timeline specifically, have played out, how there is this kind of this tugging back and forth, really this, in a lot of ways, this fight of what is truly the right decision and why and how should decisions be made when it comes to the value of human life. So anyway, that's the reason why we're talking about the Orville this morning. But let's say hello to some more people. We got Brian Barth in the chat. What's going on? Leslie Darkin, what's going on, Leslie Darkin? Hail to you. Thank you for being here. For those that wonder maybe why I say Tarkin that way, there is a hilarious parody musical, Star Wars musical called Annie, A-N-I, as for Anakin. And the guy that they have playing Darth Vader, he has this really, he doesn't do a typical, he doesn't try to do a James Earl Jones impersonation or anything. Instead, he likes to put on this voice like this. I'm an entertainer, almost, basically. And the way he calls Tarkin, who is a character in the musical, is Tarkin. Jeffrey Tarkin, what's going on, brother? So every time I see it, I feel like I have to say it that way. It's just so much fun. Gary Banjo Sandwich Worthington, hail to you, good sir. Thanks for being here. Hello, and hope you and the chatters have a cool day ahead. I hope it's a cool day as well, specifically temperature-wise, because it's been a little warm. It's been a little warm here. Would very much like for it to cool off a bit. Alice McCarthy, what's going on, good sir? Hail to you. He says, good morning, old, and how's it going? I'm having leftover pizza and some bacon for breakfast before starting my daily 3-hour workout routine. Well, hey, good luck with the routine, good sir. Hope that your recovery continues to go as well as it is. And I never understand the morning pizza personally. As much as I love pizza, not really a morning food item for me. Not really something that I enjoy on a a food level. And so I don't quite understand it, or at least for a breakfast item specifically. But that bacon, bacon sounds delightful. Sounds delicious. Pine Barrens Legend, hail to you. Hey, yeah, I'm glad that you could catch the stream too. For those that wonder, I stream at 9 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Tuesday and Wednesday is here on the OMB Reviews channel. Thursday is on my second channel, the OMB Report, where I talk more specifically about news, politics, culture stuff. But yes, thank you for joining. Leslie Darkin, good morning to you, Mr. Roy. What's going on, Mr. Roy? I don't know if you're coming off of a shift or what the deal is with you, man. But wherever you are, whatever you're doing, I hope you are swell and that you get to sleep soon. Chef Nick Nero, what's going on, good sir? Ripa proves woke is broke. I think actually more so it proves because there's definitely a lot of examples we can look to showcase the fact that even though there are a plethora of examples of woke going broke, there are still situations where woke makes money. For instance, Doctor Strange 2, Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, there are definitely woke elements within the film, within the framework of the story, and yet the film was able to make hundreds of millions in net profit. So there is still that going on, and that's the reason why I'm very interested and intrigued by the Thor: Love and Thunder box office, because to me that's going to be a pretty big test, because it's in the wake of Doctor Strange, which had some of the worst word of mouth for an MCU film, a major MCU film in the post-pandemic era, so kind of getting back on track to pre-pandemic levels. In fact, there were recent reports from AMC that they've really gotten back to, the box office has gotten back to, in certain respects, the pre-pandemic level, or very close to it. So very, very good news, at least for the domestic box office numbers there. And it also is great because it leaves less room for these major studios, especially ones like Disney, to run and hide to say pandemic, because if the studios, or rather if the theaters are showing domestically to be at very similar levels to pre-pandemic times, well, then what we're seeing is then the films and the studios that make the films failing, and not anything like that. Alice McCarthy says, I lasted about 5 minutes into Miss Marvel. Hated it that quick. Hey, I don't know how. I've only not seen the most recent episode, I think, is where I'm currently at with the show, because it really isn't good. There really isn't anything good about the show at all from a character standpoint, and really from any other standpoint either. It's just it's pretty bad. And some might ask, why do you watch it? Well, again, I watch it so that you don't have to. I think it's important also that we call out and expose the nonsense that's going on, because this is the future. Remember, instead of making Captain Marvel 2, they're making a film called The Marvels. So it's going to feature Captain Marvel. It's also going to feature Miss Marvel as well. And the fact that they're bringing in a character that really doesn't have very good appeal, you don't really root for the character, and I don't think it has as much to do with the young actress they have playing the character, because I think she does as well as she can with the script and as well as she can with the character that she's been given. But we also, I think, have to look more so to the writers of that character and think to ourselves, is this really honestly what they think mass audiences are going to want to go see? And I just don't see how the answer can be yes, especially when you look at the numbers. There have been numbers released by, was it Samba TV, which have shown that it's actually it's the worst performing show as far as the Disney shows, as far as the MCU shows, as far as even comparing it to the Star Wars shows as well. The ratings have really just not been very, very good for it. I'm trying to see here if there is any mention of these ratings for the IMDb page that has been received. It says the review aggregator website reports a 98% approval rating with an average score of 8.9 out of 5 based on 249 reviews. And so the critics, of course, love it. And why wouldn't they love it? The consensus, according to this website, let me go ahead and pull this up so that way people can see what I'm reading. Because as you all know, I tried to avoid using Rotten Tomatoes proper because it's a trash website. Wikipedia isn't perfect. However, Wikipedia is, for the most part, a pretty good collection of various sources and various data pieces. You have to be very careful with which pages, which posts from Wikipedia you use, because sometimes there's a very large inherent bias to them. But that's the reason why also you have to read and understand Wikipedia properly, which is that it's based off of sources, and if the sources are flawed, then you're going to have some problems there. But as it says here, it says they're 8.95 out of 10 based on 249 reviews. What's always interesting about those reviews too are those are reviews for the series based usually on only the first few episodes. So I just honestly think any website that posts a series overview, they do go individual episodes as well. But when they do a series overview, if someone is giving a review and a rating for an entire series before the entire series is out, that is a major problem. And I think that any site that does that cannot be trusted, because you cannot have a true understanding of any show, just like of any movie, unless you've seen the entirety of it. It goes on, and this is the general consensus, though, that I was trying to point out. Miss Marvel is a genuinely fresh addition. Yes, that's language for, yes, we're featuring new characters that aren't white, and because of that alone, it must be praised, both stylistically and substantively. I will agree that the style is unique. The style is incredibly unique to the show. There's no other show like it. However, that does not make the style good. Just because your style is unique, just because your style is something that no other show can have, whether it be Disney Plus or otherwise, does not mean that you're doing a good job. Because the show, even though it is pegged as a coming-of-age story geared towards younger audiences, the fact remains is that the MCU has statistically a much older demographic, meaning that it's mostly adults that go, right? It's mostly older teens and younger adults that are the primary basis for the MCU. And so they could be arguing, well, we're trying to expand that out, but that doesn't really seem to be panning out based off of the ratings that I've seen in other postings. It goes on here to say, with Iman Vellani ably powering proceedings with her supersized charisma. Once again, I'm not trying to go after the young actress, but to say that she has a supersized charisma is a bit of a stretch. Again, she does fine for the material that she's been given, but she's not a new star on the rise. She's not someone that I would expect or want to see in really any other major projects, because again, the performance she's giving is fine. It's just not revolutionary. They're going to act like it is because of the content of the show and because of the messaging of the show, but that's been made very clear, very clear here. It says Metacritic, which uses a weighted average, assigned a score of 78 out of 100 based on 23 critics, indicating generally favorable reviews. And I always think that the Metacritic route is usually more reliable. Once again, a 78 out of 100 versus a 98%. And this is, I think, kind of helping to expose also how flawed Rotten Tomatoes is, because 98%, however, the actual ratings is an 8.9 out of 10. That's about a 10-point swing there, buds. And the reason why is because this is for anyone that gives an actual number score, and not all critics do. This is the actual rating, or the average rating that is given. That 98% means that out of all of the 249 people that put reviews out on the website, or published their reviews to be used on the website, clicked that it was fresh. So only 2% clicked rotten when they released their reviews for it. But it's just, again, such a misleading number, because the only thing that people are going to see right away, because you have to really dive into those numbers to actually see that 8.95 and actually see what people are actually believing and saying about the show. And so when they see that 98%, it's going to lead people to think that, oh, it must be a great show. Whereas with Metacritic, the number you see right off the bat is that 78, which to me makes a lot more sense, because it is, I think, artificially high, because these critics are clearly going out of the way to praise the show because of identity politics and not actually because of it being a genuinely good show, which it's not. But it also becomes a lot more of a realistic portrayal there. So, as you can see, it goes on to talk about the first episodes here. Let's see. Oh, here we go. I always love this one. So this is the reason why you have to be careful with Wikipedia, because this is opining. This is not factual, all right? This is someone that's opining in the Wikipedia article. It says, after the release of the first episode, the series was review bombed on IMDb with a high amount of 1-star ratings. Multiple reviews were also posted, with some reviewers expressing distaste for the family-friendly aspects of the series or the change of Khan's powers, while others called the series, quote, woke, mentioning Captain Marvel. That is opining, because one could easily argue the same thing about anyone who posted a 10-star rating. But you never hear that, right? Review bombing only ever goes one way. It's only when there is either a series that is loved by the woke left that is given low ratings, or when a show is given high ratings that the woke left hate. So, for instance, The Terminal List. I've not seen The Terminal List yet, so I can't speak to it specifically, but that's a show that has a very high audience rating. Lord knows there are probably many on the left who are trying to argue that, oh, it's being review bombed by a bunch of people just posting random 10-star reviews. Well, how can you not say it's the same thing going on with this show here? Because if you tell people that a review bomb is going on, what that then does is it causes this natural reaction for other people to do their own version of a review bomb from the opposite side. So whenever I look to that, I think to myself, okay, if both sides are review bombing it, it evens out. And therefore, the score being represented is either completely trustworthy because it's evening itself out, or is completely untrustworthy because it's the actual site and the actual rating itself and the rating system itself that is actually broken. I do think it's interesting here that when talking about this, I am not seeing a mention of anything from Samba TV or anything like that. Let me see if I can do a little Control F here. Let's see. So nothing about Samba TV ratings. And I remember seeing a post talking about how the show, as far as the number of viewers are concerned, right? As far as the number of viewers are concerned, is about half of every other MCU show. So all the other MCU shows on Disney Plus had a certain rating of about 1 million viewers in the first, few hours or whatever it was, right? It's this weird metric that doesn't really mean a whole lot, but in comparison, that's when you start to see the differences. And what it showed was that Miss Marvel had about half of what all of the other shows had. And the written-in excuse to that was, well, it's a brand new character, and so it makes sense that less people would be interested in it. but it also indicates that their attempt to and their supposed power to be able to have any influence on the culture is clearly not working, because just people who are already baked into wanting to like this stuff anyway are the ones that seem to be having any desire whatsoever. Let me see if I can try and find those viewer numbers there, because I think it's interesting that people have apparently chosen to not be as engaged with this. So here we actually have, mainstream website, everybody. Mainstream website. We got Forbes. Unfortunately, it's not my boy Scotty Boy Mendelson. But notice it says here, why Miss Marvel viewership is reportedly much lower than other MCU series. So here it is right here. So once again, this report is nowhere in the Wikipedia article. It's almost as if, get out of here, you stupid pop-up. It's almost as if the writers and editors of that page on Wikipedia do not want to have any discussion whatsoever about the number of people actually watching the show. They'll love to talk about fixed ratings from websites like Rotten Tomatoes, which we know is broken. They literally changed their entire website structure to protect even just Captain Marvel. We all remember that, right? So, that's very trustworthy. But here is the actual reporting. Now, again, we take this with a grain of salt because Samba TV, though it is an interesting metric, is not necessarily going to give the most accurate portrayal. But it's still interesting, especially to compare the numbers. So, as it says right here, early reports are coming in that viewership is significantly lower than other Disney Plus series. Samba TV reports that 775,000 households watched Miss Marvel in the first 5 days, which compares unfavorable to all other live-action MCU shows. WandaVision had 1.6 million, so again, these are all based off of the first 5 days of release, and these are households. So 1.6 million for WandaVision, 1.8 million for Falcon Winter Soldier, 2.5 million for Loki, 1.5 million for Hawkeye, 1.8 million for Moon Knight. 775,000. What I think is hilarious is that one of the first excuses that they give is Miss Marvel is the brand new hero. Oh, really? Moon Knight is also a brand new hero in this in the live action space, and yet it made 1.8 million. In fact, in the first 5 days, Moon Knight had more views than WandaVision established characters, Hawkeye established characters, and even Falcon and Winter Soldier, which have major names that have been in the films. So no. Oh, she's a brand new hero. She's such a brand new hero. Maybe they're trying to go the route of, Moon Knight is known more, has been around a lot longer than Miss Marvel. And that very well might be true. However, as you mentioned even in the article, or as was mentioned in the article about the powers being changed being a complaint, this is a character that is really, really young as far as the actual MCU, and not just the MCU, but as far as the comics are concerned. We'll go ahead and try to dive into this, for instance, and let's see if they actually give some information. We'll have to go into the comics here. So notice, again, the age of this specific character. Kamala Khan, right? Miss Marvel is a superhero appearing in American comic books published by Marvel Comics, created by editors Sana Amanat and Stephen Wacker, writer G. Willow Wilson, and artist Khan is Marvel's first Muslim character to headline her own comic. Khan made her first appearance in Captain Marvel number 14 in August of 2013. Her solo series debuted in February 2014. So in the grand scheme of all comics, it doesn't even, of course, it bears mentioning that there are probably a plethora of other female characters that they could have, actually dug into and actually made stories about that have been around and have been established for a long time. But this character is such a young character. The fact that they're even having to change her character by changing her powers this early on in her career, this early on in her development, should already kind of scream that there are problems going on, right? So in the comics, as it says right here, Khan is a teenage Pakistani American from Jersey City with body morphing abilities who discovers that she was has inhuman genes, in the aftermath of the Inhumanity storyline, and assumes the mantle of Miss Marvel from her idol, Carol Danvers. So they keep the idol of Carol Danvers, of Captain Marvel. They keep that aspect of it, but then they change the story. And just reading this, Even though I've heard terrible things about this comic, I've heard terrible things about this origin story, I would much rather see this Inhumanity storyline play out, where she is infused with inhuman genes. That sounds a heck of a lot more interesting than, oh, well, we're Pakistani, and so there's this bauble that we can wear on our wrist, and it has mystical powers, and these powers basically give me whatever powers that I really want. It's almost like it's a super easy, barely inconvenient power, because it can basically become almost anything. Oh my goodness. So, publication history, Volume 1, 2013 to 2015, 2015 to 2018, Marvel Legacy relaunch. Yeah, notice how they've had to relaunch it a few times, it seems. Reception. Marvel's announcement was met with widespread reactions online. Okay, so it mentions a diversity advocacy group talking to Al Jazeera. Oh yeah, that's a really strong sign right there. Political satirist Stephen Colbert. Okay, so you're not really mentioning any negatives about the culture reaction to it? Oh my goodness. And notice how the reviews that they've given, the critical reaction, they seem to be all positive. There is nothing not to love about Miss Marvel 1. Broke onto the comic scenes a few years ago and has since stolen awards, sales, and oh right, our hearts. Wait a minute. Sales? Have the sales really been all that good for Miss Marvel? I believe about the awards, but these awards don't really seem to mean a whole lot these days. Says sales. Miss Marvel Volume 1, No Normal, was the best-selling graphic novel in October of 2014. And by November, it reached the number 2 bestseller list of paperback graphic novels. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of schools bought this so that they could have it in their libraries. Maybe that had something to do with it. Also, wasn't it a comic run? So was it a graphic novel or was it an actual comic run? Is Volume 1 just the collection of all the comics? Because if that's the case, you're not going into the individual comic sales? Seems like that would be a bit of a better thing to do. Again, I'm no comic expert, so I honestly don't know one way or the other. It says here, Marvel Volume 1, No Normal. Miss Marvel Volume 3, number 1 to number 5. Material from all new Marvel. So yeah, it seems like it's a collection. Yeah, so these are graphic novels collecting specific issues. So I find it interesting that they didn't go into the individual titles and how well those sold. Probably because they didn't sell well is my guess. So I do find it a bit interesting here. All that being said, this show is not doing well. Again, 775,000 households versus the 1.6, 1.8, 2.5. And the first excuse is brand new hero, and then you got Moon Knight. But it's amazing how they mention brand new hero, and yet they change her character right off the bat. She's being relaunched basically once again. And it's basically that old adage of stop trying to make fetch happen. It's not going to. Stop trying to make Miss Marvel happen. It's not going to. Because if you think that this is going to lead to massive Hispanic and Asian households, as it's mentioning here, Gen Z and black neighborhoods showing up in droves to go see The Marvels, please. No matter who you are, where you come from, you are having to still understand and having to accept the fact that this is not going to be a popular character in the mainstream, not because of any of the reasons that they would say, not for any of the reasons that they would say, but because people just don't really find this interesting or compelling whatsoever. I love how it mentions here, the lead actress is also completely unknown. Uh-huh. Sure. It's clearly aimed at a younger crowd. Yeah, younger crowds don't seem to be showing up for it. Disney is pairing it with the Obi-Wan show. Yeah, you maybe kind of wonder why they're pairing this with Obi-Wan, why they're releasing it, why they release it at the same time. Could it be because they recognized that the show wasn't going to do well, and so they wanted to kind of hide the numbers and create, built-in excuses for those numbers? And the same could honestly be said for Obi-Wan as well. The marketing was not great Maybe because the show is not great. While I was planning to watch it, the trailers didn't really assure me of its potential quality. So to me, what it says is that the trailers didn't look good because the content's not good. But once the show came out and you recognize, oh, well, it's all about the women empowerment and you know, females and oh man, first Muslim character. We can't dislike it. We can't hate it. Oh my goodness. But we have to love it now. No, maybe it was the marketing was bad because the concept is bad. And then when it came out, no one wanted to see it. And then people that have seen it, if they're honest, are like, yeah. Also, another excuse. She's a Pakistani Canadian Muslim. Well, I brought up the racism behind the review bombing. Oh, goodness. Okay, and this is where you can realize that this is a commentary opinion piece not based in reality whatsoever. Are there racists out there that probably dislike the show for existing because of the character being of a certain background? Sure, those people will always exist. It's not a good thing, but they will always exist. But to try and say that people are driven by racism to dislike the show and are only disliking the show because of the race of the person on screen is just downright ridiculous. Oh my goodness gracious. So racism is an excuse. So all of these excuses that they give can easily be refuted, and then they end with the biggest bunk argument of them all. Oh, it's also because of racism. Oh, shut up. Anyway, getting back to the chat. Curzilla, good morning to you, good sir. G-Man, hail to you. Fear of FEMA, what's going on? The R, just listening in. Thanks for being here. We got JKD-Buck76 saying, Taika equals Ryan Johnson when it comes to destroying lore. Yeah, I will say this much, though. As annoying as Ryan Johnson is, he's not as bad as Taika. I think Taika has become so full of himself to such a insane and to such an annoying degree that he has now taken the crown from Ryan Johnson. I really honestly believe that. Gary Banjo Sandwich says, Miss Marvel, not very marvelous. Nope, not at all. Here we come with Father Christopher Miller. Hail to you, Father, saying, just finished Miss Marvel's finale. Boring. 1 grain of incense out of 5. A little enjoyable that fizzles out pretty fast. Okay, yeah, I have not watched the recent episode. I forgot. See, that's the thing. I care so little about the show. The show is not that good at all, to the point where I didn't even recognize and realize that they were building up to the finale and that the finale was the newest episode. So I will probably begrudgingly watch that later today. But gosh, yeah, 1 incense out of 5 from Father. Yeah, it's just not a good show. Right now, it's a D+. It's a very proper Disney Plus D+ show. Because even though there are some unique ideas there, it's not enough to be able to make up for very poor writing and just really weak characters. I mean, when your own main character is a weak character, that's not a good thing. It's not a good thing at all. Let's see. Chef Nick Nero says, I've been working on a novel about my own guys using Aristotle metaphysics. Ripa has made me want to push harder. Got 15 chapters written and my own universe created. Hopefully his success pushes more. Yeah, absolutely, dude. Yeah, I think that what Ripa's doing is awesome. I think him launching this universe and the people who've supported him, even though I know very little about the Ripaverse, because as I mentioned always, I'm not really much of a comics person, but I absolutely will, try and grow in my knowledge of it to try to continue to support him, because what he is doing is very important, right? You know, some people might try and say that there's connections that can be made to Comicsgate and stuff like that, but to me, I look at what Rip is doing, and it's also very unique and very different, because he always just Ripa comes across as just such a genuine person building, brand new characters, brand new stories that have never been seen. So, not rehashing old stories or rehashing old concepts that have previously existed from a lot of different creators, but instead doing his own thing. And to see him get to over $1 million in about a 24-hour period. I forget the exact time, but it was, I think it was between 24 and 36, or at least maybe even 24 to 48 hours that he was able to get to $1 million. And also he got so much traffic that his website was having issues. There were crashes going on. And even though it's terrible, and I hate that happened at all, because that obviously is going to impact what people are able to see and get, it's still just so amazing to see that happen for him. So yeah, continue on in your writing, dude. And that concept sounds incredibly interesting, right? Because I always forget if it was Plato or Aristotle who had the concept of the demiurge. Because basically when we talk about Plato and Aristotle, they recognize the existence of, obviously immaterial. They recognize the existence of the immaterial, right? Concepts of soul. They use terms like idea or form, but there's also a concept of a god-like entity as well within the philosophy. And I think it might be Aristotle, because his is a lot more polished. Plato's philosophy, though important in a lot of ways, and there's a lot of really good stuff in Plato, especially like Allegory of the Cave and such. Aristotle really is able to kind of fine-tune that, and obviously I believe that Aristotle's philosophy is perfected in Aquinas, who is able to really take how far Plato and how far Aristotle were able to get without Christ, and able to really fulfill that. But yeah, good luck, man. Gary Banjo Sandwich says, Wings of Power trailer drops tomorrow. Eek! Oh, another trailer? That's right. We've just gotten so-called teaser trailers for the Rings of Power. Can only imagine what it's going to be. I imagine it's going to be no different than any of the teasers that we've gotten. We might get new footage, maybe, but that's about pretty much all we can say. Zachariah315, what's going on? Leslie Dorkin. Time to say, that's cool. I've not heard of the Star Wars musical Annie before. I'll have to check it out. Yeah, the group Star Kid Productions, they've kind of fallen from grace for me. They got really political. During the last election, for instance, they were doing a bunch of live streams with obviously with the pandemic going on, they were doing live streams. And a lot of it was really to push and to promote political candidate. It really rubbed me the wrong way, because it was always assumed what their politics were based on just their general ideas, and some of the lines in the shows every now and then kind of hinted at certain things, but they mostly kept things out of their shows as far as just blatant political, ideologuing. But they've really gone to an extreme degree, unfortunately. But luckily, Annie is not one of them, and Annie's just a lot of fun. ANI, of course. Orange Eye Reviews, what's going on? Hello there. He goes on to say, Miss Marvel Talk, I will let you watch it. I cannot stomach that crap anymore. Sticking to stuff I like. Hey, yeah, kudos to you. Father then adds in to say, regarding Miss Marvel, I've been to Jersey City only once, 25 years ago. I brown bagged it, publicly drinking adult beverages. It was the only thing I enjoyed about Jersey City. Yeah, when they try to basically glamorize Jersey City and make it look beautiful in that way, I can understand if the concept, because a lot of people go through this, right? Even if you live in complete garbage and complete crap, sometimes you love your hometown so much that you're willing to look at it through the rose-tinted glasses. I know a lot of people, for instance, who are from New Orleans who love to rose-tint glass the city. Love to gloss over the terrible education from public education, the terrible crime rates, the terrible corruption, all of just the nasty, disgusting stuff that the city, honestly, it's just so filled to the brim with. It's so corrupt. So glad to be out of the city just because of all those really toxic elements of the city. And so I know very, very well how people can do that. And so for the show to do that, okay, yeah, there's definitely a precedent for it, right? There are definitely people that in real life will do that for sure. And I think that is something that's incredibly important to showcase. But at the same time, let's just not try to pretend that it's this mecca kind of thing with, on brand with Miss Marvel, that it's somehow this glamorous place, or at least more glamorous than what it actually is. Let's see. Chef Nick Nero says, Journalist is like live action Punisher, lots of similarities. Cool. Definitely excited to check that out at some point. That might be the next thing I try to watch. Alice McCarthy says, I would rather have a Disney Plus show of America Chavez and the search for pizza. Oh, man. Yep, I think a lot of people would probably agree with that. Man Squatch, what's going on? Hail to you. Neil, what's going on? Hail to you. We got Rogue Disney in the chat. Hail to you. Thank you very much for being here. Forever Sci-Fi, hail to you. Thanks for being here as well. Saying good morning, just listening in while working. We'll hope work is going swimmingly. Hope it is going very well. Remember, if you have a comment or question, please put @Odin at the very beginning of your comment. @Odin lets me know you're trying to get my attention. @Odin. And unless you're a member. If you're a member on the channel, you do not have to do that. Jim1, thanks for tagging, saying, do you think Disney will start cutting budgets for the future MCU movies? I can't see Marvel being given $200+ million per film if they are no longer able to gross $1 billion. Well, that's an interesting dynamic, though, is that, and we've talked about this before, that Disney has been bleeding money on a lot of projects. I mean, they were the second biggest loser, only to Warner Brothers, for the fiscal year 2021, as far as their box office numbers are concerned. And it is something that really they can't avoid, right? They're one of the biggest box office losers, one of the lowest grossing box offices of last year. And obviously they're on a good track this year with Doctor Strange. But then you also have to look to films like Lightyear, which is right now I'm expecting it to end being $150 million in the red. But the biggest problem with that thought process, the biggest problem with thinking, oh, surely they're going to learn their lesson and surely they're going to spend less money is still the fact, unfortunately, that they are still making a lot of money. Disney Plus, for instance, they have, at last count, there was, I think, around 200 million or so subscribers worldwide. If you think about each person paying on average $5, which I think is lowballing it, if they are just paying $5 each, and that includes even people who get it for free, because remember, it ain't free. You know, if they're getting it free from their self-service, for instance, the self-service is paying, probably at a discounted rate, but is still paying for those subscribers. And so even if you take a lower number, like a $5 per number, you're still looking at close to, with the 200 million active users, around 200 million active users worldwide, being around like $1 billion or so per month. And then, of course, you have to add in ESPN Plus. That's also something that we often, I think, forget about is ESPN Plus, right? Owned by Disney. ESPN, major company, bringing in lots of money. Not nearly as much as maybe before because of them going woke, but still pretty major. And then also they own a controlling stake in Hulu as well. And so you have to add in the Hulu subscribers that exist. So they're getting a lot of money from that. And also, based on this Wikipedia article, it's actually 137.7 million users is what is being said here. So again, if you even just take the average of $5 per, you're looking close to $1 billion, and that's a month that they are getting from their subscribers. So you look to 150 million loss for Lightyear, they make that up in a month. Because the overhead cost for these streaming services is not likely that high. And so they're going to likely keep a huge portion of that money they're getting, since they own the rights to most, if not all, of the content on their platform. But it is, I think, something that is... this is basically what's going to allow them to continue to push forward and continue to fund these non-profitable movies and these really bad rollouts. So let us see. And also, of course, they are going to be releasing it in more countries in the future. So on June 8th, in fact, of this year, they actually released it in a lot more countries. And then it says June 14th. There are other ones, it looks like. And then there's going to be more launches in the future as well. It says here, on March 29th, Disney announced that it would launch a service in South Africa, in Middle East and North Africa, and most remaining European countries this year. Launch as Disney Plus Hotstar. While not branded under Hotstar, variant of Disney Plus Hotstar app for non-PC devices was made available for 7 MENA markets, including Israel, as the Disney Plus service officially launched in June of 2022 in said markets, which feature the same user interface and login system as Hotstar, and does not support the Disney ID SSO like the international version of the Disney app. Talks here about the reception. In 2020, Apple Inc. named Disney Plus the Apple TV app of the year. It was the second and third most downloaded free app of the year globally, It was also voted the best app of 2020 by Google Play users. I find that to be hilarious. But anyway, the point of it is to say that because of all of those users, though, and just assuming a lower number per month per user, you are looking at a situation where they've got a constant flow of money from Disney Plus, a constant flow of money from ESPN Plus, from, again, their controlling stake of Hulu. It says here they hinted at the possible Hulu Disney Plus merger could happen in the future to create an all-in-one streaming service on Disney Plus. Mentioned that Disney might ditch its streaming bundle of Disney Plus, Hulu, and ESPN eventually, similar to the Star brand of Disney Plus available in overseas markets. So as I mentioned, and this is something that I think a lot of us forget, is that they do not own Hulu outright. They own a controlling stake in Hulu. So they have very much full control in a lot of ways over Hulu as well. But they are likely going to have those come together. And you're already seeing those steps take place, because they recently added a feature where they had it be where if you wanted to have access to the entire library, you had to create basically a password, a passcode account, or not a password, because they wanted to ensure that people who were accessing that content were adults, because they allowed for a lot of the Fox films, for instance, that they own that are PG-13 rated R, that those are available. And so, yeah, I think you're going to see eventually a migration of the Hulu stuff onto Disney Plus, as they likely will merger at some point in the future officially. But anyway, yeah, I don't think they're going to be cutting budgets, though, because, again, it's almost an endless amount of revenue for them. Alex McCarthy says, the Mean Girls reference, by the way, it's Wednesday, and on Wednesdays we wear pink. This is true, except for me. I don't do that, but I appreciate it nonetheless. Jared Thorne, what's going on? Welcome back. Man Squatch tagged and say, I thought it ended last week. I want to go see the train wreck, but I don't want to leave your stream. Hey, yeah, I mean, obviously, do what makes you happy. Not that would make you happy, but it is what it is. JKD76, who's a member, says, more like Rings of Girl Power, no thanks. After Peter Jackson's trilogy, I've seen the best possible and refuse to settle for scraps. Yeah, Hobbit was a pretty epic failure in a lot of ways. It just really was a major disappointment. And Rings of Power is looking to be a major disappointment as well. It does not look like Middle-earth. It does not feel like Tolkien whatsoever. They've made it very clear that they don't care about the legacy of Tolkien by introducing characters, by introducing different species and races, etc., that just do not fit within the lore of the original universe built by Tolkien at all. And it's also clear that they do not care that they are creating stories out of thin air, that they are altering stories that they are allowed to alter, basically, because they can't deviate from the main time frame or timeline, which is the reason why they're doing things at the time that they're doing them and focusing on characters that they are focusing on, because it gives them more freedom to do this and to do these things. But all it's doing is crapping on the legacy of Tolkien. And that's why I think the first episode is going to be huge. I think the first episode is going to be gigantic. I think that a lot of people are going to, and I think rightfully so, is it, how much of a hot mess is it going to be, basically? And you're going to have some people that walk away from it saying, I enjoyed that, give me more. And then you're going to have others, and I think it's going to be a larger number, who are going to say, wow, that is not Lord of the Rings, and are going to walk away. And then you're going to have people like me, people like Gary and Az and Josiah and so many others who are going to be saying, yeah, we're watching it, we really don't want to, but we want to talk about what they're doing. We want to talk about, what it is that they're doing to this lore and why it's so important for us to continue to call that out. Quattrina VR, what's going on? I got suspended yesterday for 12 hours for tweeting hashtag Ellen Page days ago. Immediately got back on Twitter last night, pointing out that my actual neighbor is named Ellen Page. Boo! That's awesome. Yeah, I have not gotten a response yet to the second appeal that I put forward. So for those that maybe have missed it, I got locked out. I got locked out of my Twitter account for posting factual data. And I decided then to file an appeal. Less than 5 minutes, they said that the appeal was rejected, that I had violated their rules. So then I put in a second appeal and have yet to hear back from them on the second appeal specifically. So we'll have to wait and see. But as I mentioned before, it's not that big of a deal to me, because it's not a major factor in my life. And so I don't really quite understand exactly what is, I don't really understand what the situation is with it, but yeah. All right. Back into the chat. Hound 3000, what's going on? Curzilla, who's a member, says Plato too early for a philosophical conversation. It's never too early for a philosophical conversation. How dare you? Brian Barth, it's been a few days, I think, but I forget the exact day in which he passed away. But yeah, absolutely, rest in peace, James Caan. May perpetual light shine upon him. Segav Segal tagged to say, do you think Disney bleeding money will make them change their ways away from wokeness? As I mentioned, I don't, because they are still making so much money from other revenue streams that they can write it off. Now, and that's why I've said before, the only way Disney is ever going to change is if the stockholders do something, because their stock is dropping. We're seeing historic dropping levels for the Disney stock price. And that's the only thing that's going to have an impact, because if the stockholders say, hey, you might still be making money as a company, right? We might be solvent. We might be making mass profits because of Disney Plus and Hulu and ESPN and our parks and all this other stuff. That might be true, but our stock price is not. And so we are losing millions upon millions of dollars in our investments. Fix this. That, I think, is the only way. It's the only way that anything is ever going to change, is if the stockholders say or do something. Because they can put on paper to say, hey, look, we're all good on paper, officially. But the stock price is another matter. Clifton 3D, what's going on? He's a member on the channel saying, and working and listening. Hope you have a great day. Hey, thanks for listening, man. Hope you're having a great day as well. Input latency, hail to you. Thank you for being in the chat. Brian Barth says he recommends watching Severance on Apple TV+. I've heard about it. I've heard about the show. Have not watched it myself. JakeDebuck76 says, Galadriel, the angry Whammon warrior, is an insult to actual Galadriel. Might as well make Gandhi hitman from India. Yeah, it definitely would seem to be a similar a similar concept, right? A similar amount of insanity, to say the very least. So anyway, let's get back to it. Let's go first talking about the Orville, all right, because it is in the title. We haven't talked a whole lot about it, so let's go ahead and talk about it. All right, Orville Season 3 right now. We have 6 episodes, I believe, that have been released. I don't want to go spend too much time on these. 6 episodes have been released so far. Next episode is going to be released tomorrow. And it's called From Unknown Graves. Ooh, From Unknown Graves. Interesting. So it's on the weekly release model, and it is a show that is, again, we've been looking forward to this for a long time. The Orville has been a really awesome show, seasons 1 and 2 being on Fox, and then, of course, with the buying of Fox properties by Disney, there were a lot of questions about where the Orville would be. It was very much strongly hinted by and strongly indicated by Seth MacFarlane that it was going ahead, that it had support, etc. And it is a show that is now being rebranded as the Orville New Horizons. I don't know if that was done for legal reasons or just to separate it out from the originals. But to be honest, I think that the rebranding of it as the Orville New Horizons really does, to me, indicate a lot more truth about the show than what they probably had in mind. Because the show is very different. You have the same characters. You have still really good character-driven stories. You still have very well-developed characters and good actors portraying said characters. But you also have a major difference in the entire tone of the show. One of the things I noticed early on in one of the first episodes, and I mentioned this last night, is it has almost a Star Trek The Motion Picture feel. Where in the very beginning of Star Trek The Motion Picture, you have this just egregiously long take showing you the outside of the ship, right? Really just laying it in and laying it on quite thick. I don't like that part. I'm not a big fan of Star Trek The Motion Picture, to be honest. Wrath of Khan is a lot of fun. The first one, not so much. And one of the things I didn't like about it was that it felt like there was so much wasted time on things that really weren't that important. And one of them was the showing of the ship. they do that almost, I don't know if it was done on purpose or not, but they do that in the very beginning of this new era, of this new season, and they spend a lot of time showing a lot of the CGI elements of the show, right? Showing the ships and showing space itself to such an excessive degree that it's distracting. So that's one of the things I really don't like about this new iteration of the show, is that clearly they have more money, clearly they have a much bigger budget, but they're almost trying to show it off, and they're showing it off to such a degree that it's distracting, and that's never a good thing. There's one episode where in the very beginning it's all about trying to promote the fact they have this new fighter ship, and the whole sequence takes it seems like it takes 5 to 10 minutes. And all that it is a character flying in a jet, flying in a new spaceship. That's all that's going on. The only dialogue is, oh, I'm going to take it to this level, or I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And then he lands it. And then that's it. It's to introduce this new ship into the show. And that's the kind of stuff that they didn't do in the first 2 seasons. And so it's stuff like that where it's other moments too that exist where you feel like they're lingering on certain shots for certain lengths of time, and the only excuse or the only reasoning you can think of is, oh, they're just trying to show off the fact that they have a bigger budget. And not all the shots really look all that good, to be honest, either. So you have that issue going on where the show just doesn't feel the same, right? The show just doesn't really feel the same at all from that aesthetical standpoint. You know, from a character standpoint, things like that, there's a lot of similarities, there's a lot of strengths there, but from a aesthetical standpoint, it feels so different because they're just showing off the money they have. Also, the pacing of the show is not nearly as strong as it was when it was on broadcast TV, when it was on Fox. And obviously that show, when it was first released, was made for that, and so it was made to lead into commercial breaks. And so with this series, though, they're able to present a little bit of a longer episode, right? They're able to spend a little bit of, they're able to spend a little bit longer of time, a little bit more amount of time. I just lost my train of thought because Yellow Flash is in the chat. Oh my goodness, Yellow Flash. Hail to you, good sir. Thanks for being here. I'm just, I'm nervous now. Yellow Flash, thank you for being here, man. I appreciate it. Shout out to Yellow Flash in the chat. Anyway, I'm a little starstruck at the moment. Not as much with the show, not as much with the Orville. So, to be honest, I look to, so trying to get back on track. So I looked to the Orville, and again, I feel like they're spending way too much money on these shots that really don't serve the purpose of the actual story themselves. The pacing, that was what I was talking about. I feel like the pacing is also off. They have more time to do things, and instead of doing more creative story elements, it seems as almost like they are trying to fill in the time with these budget shots of, hey, look at all the money that we have, or hey, look at the new technology that we have, or hey, look what we can do now that we're not on broadcast television anymore. And that is a bit distracting, and that's never a good thing in a show. You add on top of that then also the actual stories that are being told this time, and you actually spend the time going into, I guess you could, look at as being the philosophy of the show. And there's a few things in the show, there's a few episodes that are actually really disturbing. You might not want to look at the screen directly if you don't want to know anything about these episodes that happen. But some of the things that are presented are especially in the last couple of episodes, right? There's things from the other episodes too, but really the first two, or rather the last two episodes, the last 3 episodes, now that I'm being honest, you had Gently Falling Rain, and then you have A Tale of Two Topas, and then Twice in a Lifetime. So Gently Falling Rain deals with the Krill, and it deals with the Krill about to sign a peace treaty, a historic peace treaty, and then the female Krill, I think it's Talea, who had a romantic relationship with Ed, comes out of the woodwork and is staging a coup, right, to take over the government. And so this episode had a couple issues for various reasons. So for one, there are clear references and clear connections being made in not only the rhetoric of Talea, but then also there are fake videos of the Supreme Chancellor that were being created as well. And all of the talking points from them very clearly mirrors populist groups, and therefore there's a direct correlation being made with Donald Trump. In fact, at one point during one of her speeches, Talea says something similar to, we're going to make was it, we're going to make Krill great again, or something similar to that. Almost word for word, same vein at the very least. And so that, I think, is a pretty major problem already. So they're bringing in modern politics, modern, commentary, and one could argue, saying, well, old Trek did that too. Never, I don't think you could ever say that it was this egregious. Maybe you can. Again, there are probably people out there that are much bigger Trek fans and much bigger Trek historians than I am. Again, my only knowledge of Trek is really Deep Space Nine. As I've mentioned, that's the only Trek that I've really dove into, and I'm 6 seasons in, or starting the 6th season, very beginning first third of the 6th season. But I look to that and I think to myself, like, okay, there's just too many moments. Yeah, we're talking about the Orville here. There's just too many moments where they are having these connections, and then there's this commentary, this line in that episode about about populist rhetoric. And saying, people will use fear to try and do this or that. And it's like, yes, I see what you're trying to say, but it's also clear that you're trying to make connections between modern politics, United States, and then what's going on here on the Krill homeworld. And so there are these, obviously, annotations of not just populism, but also of, America first connections, right? Krill first, making Krill great again, making their homeworld great again, and then also the fact that they are a the fact that they are a unirace, basically, right? They are homogenized race, right? There's no room for immigration or anything like that. And that's one of the things that's brought up is, oh, well, if we open ourselves up to this treaty, it means that non-Krills are going to come here, and kind of indicating the bloodlines being watered down, etc. And then you find out in the course of the show that Ed actually has a daughter. That Ed and Talea, during their romantic entanglements, actually have a half-human, half-Krill child that is being hidden because obviously that would destroy Talea's coup, as that goes against everything that she actually preaches. And in the course of the episode, not only do you have these specific connections being made, but then there's another connection that's being made. I mentioned this briefly last night on the Welcome to Asgard podcast, where they make reference to the issue of abortion. And what they tell us in the show is that the Krill, in their laws, have outlawed abortion. Abortion is illegal amongst their culture and amongst their people. And not only is it illegal, but the crime for committing such an act, right? The crime against by the parents, the punishment for the parents specifically, not the doctors or anything like that, but the parents who do these actions, the parents who abort their child, is that there is technology on the Krill homeworld that allows basically their DNA to be taken in and analyzed, and they are actually able to replicate a holographic image of what their child would have looked like and what their child would have sounded like. And the punishment for the crime is that they have to talk to their would-have-been child and answer the child's questions. And the child asks questions like, why didn't you want me, etc. And the line from Ed is, that's barbaric. That's barbaric. And of course, this episode comes out the week after, or the weekend after the Roe v. Wade decision, right? The Dobbs v. Jackson decision comes out. So there's a little bit of on the nose there, right? The timing of that being really on the nose, and there's some questions that I think I have with that. But then again, you have this commentary about populist rhetoric. You have this commentary about it's barbaric, right? To not have abortion, like the killing of innocent life, be legal, and it's barbaric to make the parents actually have to have a conversation with the child that would have been, right? The child that was, but whose life was destroyed before they could develop into the child that they're actually witnessing. And so you have that in that episode. So that was in episode 4. And then episode 5 is the Tale of Two Topas. And so this is clearly a commentary about the trans issue. Now, I will say that I do think it's different. I think that Seth MacFarlane specifically, as the writer and director, I think he was trying to make commentary that, trying to make a trans allegory, as it were. But because he wrote the character of Topa in the original series in such a way, he really can't bring that message home to the same extent. Because in the case of Topa, when Topa was born, she was born a female. And according to the laws of, Moklis, right, of Mocklin law and of Mocklin tradition, it is that if they are born female, they have to have basically, sex reassignment surgery to be male. And then over the course of those first seasons, you find out that there actually have been female Mocklins that have been born who did not have the surgery because their parents didn't want them to or couldn't do it to them, etc. So it already indicated that the Mocklins have no problem whatsoever mutilating their children. But they also treat it as something that happens very quickly and very easily. And maybe that's because of the future technology that they have and, et cetera. But like, oh yeah, it's no big deal. So in this episode, it's a tale of two Topas, meaning that Topa is having identity issues. The difference there, though, is that Topa was actually born a biological female and is starting to have problems with the fact that she has been artificially turned into a male and is therefore having the identity issue because of that. That's not the same thing as what's going on when it comes to the trans issue, right? So I think he was trying to make a trans allegory there about, well, it's not who you really are, right? You should be allowed to be who you really are. But it falls flat because I think that he wrote this episode in response to recent changes and recent developments within the trans community, as far as the activism is concerned, and really the growing support amongst that community, and also the growing criticism amongst that community as well. I think he wrote it for that, but because of his own writing from the original show, from the original episodes, I think it falls flat. I think that he's not able to really get that same message across, or he's not able to get that specific message across, because, well, okay, we're talking about a culture that, again, mutilates their children, already mutilates their children, and one of those mutilated children growing up saying, hey, something's not quite right here. So, again, they're trying to push that trans allegory, though, a bit, and there's some lines in there that also show different connections to it. And so, again, getting modern politics, modern issues into their show to a degree that they hadn't done in previous episodes before. And that also brings up another criticism of the show, which is that in the first two seasons, it has a lot of comedy in it. There's a lot of fun moments in it. There's a lot of moments of laughter. In this season, I cannot actually remember yet. I cannot think of a single scene that I found really entertaining, that I found really funny. It's almost as if it's jumped to being a drama that has some lighthearted comedic moments, similar to maybe a DS9, than the actual comedy instead. And I think that is especially also made clear in the more recent episode. And so for those that don't want spoilers on the most recent episode 6, you may want to turn off for now. I'll go ahead and throw up the spoilers icon for that one, since this one's been out only for it's been out for almost a week, but I like to still be able to give people the options. So talking now about episode 6, right? Twice in a Lifetime. So in this episode, we have another moral issue that's brought up. Only this one, I think, digs a little bit deeper into the philosophy of Seth MacFarlane, more so than anything else. So in this show, or rather in this episode, the character of Gordon gets sent back in time, back to the year 2015. So the Orville then decides to go and rescue him because they find in the archives, in the history books, he actually lived a full life. And they, wait a minute, that's not good. That's not okay. He broke the law. He broke our Federation law, and therefore we have to go back and not just to save him, but also to try and make sure that the timeline doesn't get messed up. Even though when I looked at that, I think to myself, okay, well, it seems to me like the timeline was still okay, and that he didn't really disrupt all that much. So they go back, and in their attempt to go back, they end up coming back late. So they end up coming back in 2025. And so they end up showing 10 years later, 10 years after Gordon had been there. And so during the course of that time, Gordon had given up hope that they would ever come back. He tried to follow the rules initially. He tried to follow their rules of not engaging with the timeline, of staying as remote as possible, having the smallest amount of interactions as possible. But over time, he gets lonely. He's a human being. And so what he does is he decides to get a job. He also decides to go find the woman that he loves, right? Laura from the episode where the cell phone comes into play. He decides to go meet her and dates her. They get married. They have 2 kids. So one kid who is a little older and then one who is about to be born, right? One child in the womb. And so when they find this out, that he's broken the laws, all they care about, the obsession that they care about is, you broke union law. You broke union law. This is not okay. We need to take you back, right? And you need to be held accountable. Basically, you need to abandon your kids. You need to abandon your family. And then Gordon's like, I can't do that. I'm sorry. Like that, I'm not going to abandon my wife and kids. That's just, it wouldn't be fair to them. And it's not the morally correct thing to do. And so then they decide, okay, then we're going to go back to 2015 and make sure that this never happens. So they make the decision and they go back. There's this great emotional arc. And so the actor that plays Gordon does a great job in this episode. As I said, the characters and the acting is still really good in the show. And Gordon is, of course, just his heart's being put out there because he knows that it's going to be within moments that his family is going to disappear. So the decision that's made by them kills these children, destroys the lives of these children. And again, they're going to try and argue, well, it's because if they didn't, the whole timeline could be ripped up, and think about all the other lives that could be impacted down the line, etc. And I understand that to a degree, but it's so direct in this instance, right? It's one of those things where it's, okay, we're talking about a potential problem versus an actual problem, right? A potential issue, a potential death versus an actual death. And then I go back to that episode from DS9 I was talking about last night of Children of Time, where for them, their mission is to say, no, we are going to preserve the lives of these 8,000 people who should not exist. We're going to preserve them, though, because it's 8,000 lives. It's 8,000 lives. Whereas Seth MacFarlane, in his vision and his philosophy within his show, it shows a much different thought, right? Common good, greater good, socialistic, communistic understanding and mindset, which some might argue is more traditionally Trek, versus DS9, which definitely is, from what I've been told, a lot more open to or less critical of religion and morality in a general sense. But I think that it's just so disturbing to see that that's the kind of mindset that is being perpetuated in modern entertainment, including entertainment that up until this season I was actually a pretty big fan of. All right, let's go back into the chat, see what y'all have to say about this. All right, Curzilla, who's a member, says, gigantic or not, I won't be in the audience for this fake Middle-earth nonsense. I don't blame you. Ryan Doles says, do you think the dumpster fire that is Lightyear will put future Pixar movies at Disney Plus exclusives? It could. It could, because then they could maybe justify spending less money since they're only making it for the smaller screen and not the big screen. So that could be a way that they cut costs. And then they could also argue saying, well, Disney Plus is going to pay for it anyway. And then also by putting it on Disney Plus, we get to hide our numbers. And so by hiding our numbers, that means that our stock price won't be as directly impacted. So yes, I do actually think that could happen, that they put more of their titles on Disney Plus. I mean, I look at the fact that Lightyear, after only 4 weeks of release, has already been pulled out at over 1,000 screens. That's almost unheard of for most Disney films, let alone Disney Pixar films, to be pulled this early from so many theaters. So yes, I do absolutely think that. And it's not because of anything else other than they're going to try to protect their stock price. Because as I mentioned, they can take a financial loss. Like on paper, they can take a lot of these financial losses that they're seeing from their movies. What they can't take is that lowering of and that loss of revenue. That loss of revenue in regard specifically to what is going on with their stock price specifically. That is something they can't afford to do. Forever Sci-Fi, who is a member, says, clearly Tolkien based Galadriel on part of the Bible where Mary went on a revenge trip against the Romans after Jesus was crucified. Yes, of course. Of course. Yes, right? Yeah, I mean, we looked at Galadriel and we looked to the inspirations for her character and some of the other characters, and now all of a sudden it's like, nope, we don't care about that. Yellow Flash, thank you again for stopping by, man. I don't know if you're still in the chat or not, but I appreciate you stopping by. He says, so much time was spent on Enterprise in the motion picture is because the ship was kind of a character itself. Yeah, I understand that to a degree, but the opening to me is egregious. The opening sequence is so over the top. There's no reason for them to have spent that much time. I was looking at my watch because it was that much time where they were just looking at the ship. So I have no problem with a ship being a character in and of itself, but there's a good way of doing it. And I don't think it's done very well in the original motion picture. Cosmo James, what's going on? Hail to you. Curazilla, who is a member, says, I'll take the spaceship shots over Bordas sitting naked on an egg. I don't know. I think that the Bordas sitting naked on an egg is actually really funny. Oh, man. I'd rather just have, let's just not have either of them. Jaggedy Buck says, should I even watch the Orville? Season 1 and 2, yeah. I think that you should watch seasons 1 and 2. Season 3, right now, it seems to be mostly a miss because it's very different. I think that if you're going to really enjoy seasons 1 and 2, if you do enjoy seasons 1 and 2, I think season 3 destroys, for me at least, a lot of the good nature I had for the show. Let's see. Curazilla tags and says, that's true. Even with the Force exchange on Topa early on, the episodes were humorous. This season, not so much. Exactly. I think that might be one of the biggest problems, right? Is I can nitpick the story elements that I have been doing, but when it comes to the general feel of the show being different, that's a bad thing. You don't change the feel of the show when the feel of the show is the reason why people were drawn to it in the first place, right? People were drawn to it because it felt more like real Trek versus what we were seeing with Picard and other things from what people have said about those shows. But at the same time, people were going to the show because there was a levity, there was a comedic element. They were being serious too, and that was fine, but they were at the very least also still maintaining that comedic space. And they've kind of abandoned that space in this recent season. Alrighty. Norporeal Lifeform, thanks for being here, man. Let's see. Sundrop Puddleton, thank you very much for being here, and thanks for tagging. Again, if you have a comment or a question that you want me to read aloud, please just put @Odin at the very beginning of your comment. @Odin lets me know that you're trying to get my attention, unless you are a member on the channel, in which case part of your membership is that you do not have to tag. So Sundrop Puddleton tagged to say, Mercer asks why didn't she abort her child, means he is okay with that, but then talks about how he misses his daughter and writes letters to her, showing the value of life and not their points. Yeah, I mean, it's just amazing to me the level of hypocrisy within the show. That's just what I'm looking at it as. As I said, that line from Mercer of, this is barbaric, of them not allowing it in their Krill society, of it being illegal, and of the punishment that the parents have to go through for doing such an action, for committing such a crime. And then you still have Mercer, who is showing himself to be very just inconsistent as well. Basically, it seems more like Seth MacFarlane wants himself and his character to look good, even if it forsakes story and consistency. Yeah, the Orville might be a character in and of itself as well. However, as I said, in previous episodes, they did not do this. In previous seasons, they did not spend this much time on it. And it's very clear that the reason why they're spending as much time in Orville New Horizons on these external shots is because, not because they're trying to show the Orville, it's because they're trying to show, look at how much money we have. Look at all of the money we have now. Look at all of the money that we can spend now. Look at the budget we have. Going back to that episode early on where Gordon is just flying a ship around for a good 5 to 10 minutes. It served no purpose to the story whatsoever. It was, I remember watching it, and the entire time I'm just like, oh, they're still on this? Wait, they're not going to move on from this? Oh, wait, they're still doing this? Okay. Oh, he's landed it. Okay. That's it? All right. The effects didn't even look all that great. I mean, they look fine. They look better than some of the earlier effects in the earlier seasons, but All right. getting back into the chat. Got a couple of comments now from some members. Clifton 3D and also from someone tagging. Clifton 3D says, I think that punishment was too mild. Well, yeah. And actually, it's, again, for me as a Catholic and as looking at it from a moral position of it being, biologically and factually speaking murder, I would look to the person who did the direct action as being the one who should be the most responsible. So doctors in most instances. So I think doctors should be held to a much higher account. But I think that for the parents specifically, I do think that, again, even though it's a fictional world and even though that technology doesn't exist and there's not a good chance of that ever existing or that we would ever get to the point where society would even think that would be okay, I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to deny the fact that I look to that and think to myself, actually, I don't see why. To me, it's similar to, in a similar way, it mirrors to me legislation that exists that mandates that before any abortion can take place, that a mother has to be shown her ultrasound. Because normally that is enough for a lot of mothers to say, oh, I can't do this anymore. Because when they actually recognize that what the doctor has said, the lie that the doctor has said of, oh, it's just a clump of cells, when they actually see, no, this is a little baby. This is a little human life right here. It changes that entire worldview and perspective. So it's almost like, for me, the Krill's version of that is the creation of the child that would have been in that instance. Whereas, obviously within our own society and with our own culture, with those laws specifically, the attempt is to try to stop that from ever happening. But I think it's I think it has a similar effect. And I think it's, again, generally a good thing. It's always good to stop murder. Geek True 64 tagged to say, in episode 6, they do explain in the beginning the way time travel works with the sandwich means the family does still exist because of the temporal paradox in a divergent timeline. They don't really seem to indicate that, though. They really don't seem to indicate that in the remainder of the episode, right? Because the sandwich line really is just kind of thrown out there. And even my wife kind of turned to me during the show, and she didn't have the same moral qualms that I had with the things that were going on. But even she was like, what in the world's going on? Like basically saying, well, I guess it's time travel. And I was just looking at all the things that were going on and everything. And I'm like, gosh, time travel storylines can always just be so messy. And that's why I look to a show like DS9 and how they handle time travel. And then I look to what they do in the Orville. And I think that it's messy in almost every instance, but there are ways and arcs and themes that you can really stress that allow a lot of audiences to be able to forgive some of the logical flaws that might exist or some of the logical fallacies that might be present, which, again, time travel just kind of asks for that. But the decisions that they decide to make within the show don't have that same nuance. Because, no, by the end of the show, they indicate that it's not just that he's not going to know them anymore, it's that they are not going to exist. That's the indication that's being made by what they decide to do. So early on, they might indicate one thing, but I'm saying that by the end of the show, that is not what they're trying to indicate. By the end of that episode. JKD76 says, who knows, maybe 20 years from now, Kurtzman will make his own version of the Orville and ruin it like he did Star Trek. Hey, you never know. Leslie Dorkin tagged and said, I think that these abortionists will answer to God one day for all the murders that they commit. Yeah, and that's why all I can do is hope and pray that they go through a conversion. It happens. There's a lot of very prominent pro-life doctors who are former abortionists and are trying to make amends in their own way for the actions that they committed. And that's what I think we should pray for in general. Let's see, going back into the comments for the tag, getting close to the end of the stream. So let's see. Akuris, what's going on? Welcome to the chat. Had to say, it's just unfortunate that one show I was hoping for as an escape is slowly turning into every other franchise. That said, I still think the Alien episode was the worst. The Alien episode was the worst. Trying to think about which one that would have been. Okay, Morality Paradox. That's right. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I almost forgot about that one. You're right. I almost forgot about that one. Yeah, the mortality paradox. Yeah. So yeah, the civilization that had based its entire existence on Kelly as being a deity has advanced so much that they become immortal, essentially. Yeah, there's a lot of creepy stuff in that episode. Because to me, the commentary is, very transhumanistic, which I have a lot of ethical and moral problems with. But yeah, I totally agree that is a bad episode as well. But again, I look to that story, and it has that very similar morality as those other episodes that I've mentioned, right? The morality that seems to be embraced by and pushed by Seth MacFarlane, because there's other episodes early on that I'd even talk about where there is a lot of really negative thoughts and really negative commentary being made towards God, towards belief in God, towards religion in general. And yeah, it's whenever you're just so on the nose with that kind of stuff, you isolate your audience, or you isolate part of your audience. And I think that is a pretty big problem in the long run. And yeah, I was loving this show for so long because, as you mentioned, it was a great escape. But now they have just gotten so invested and involved in going a little bit too close to the chest. Yeah, definitely think that there's a lot of problems, for sure. JKD76, we all answer to God for every word and deed. Not looking forward to that day, and I'll need mercy. And that's, again, the reason why sacraments exist, why God recognizes our need for, our need for forgiveness. It's why we see in Scripture, confess your sins to one another in the context of the elders being called, and why we see the apostles and their successors being given the ability to bind and loose, right? To bind and loose sins. And I think that that's such an important aspect of it, right? Is we do answer for all the things that we do, but luckily we are given graces during our time on earth to be able to fight those episodes, or rather to fight those times in our life when we do fall into sin. Kurzilla, Gordon flying the new fighter around was to me a mirror of what Tom Paris built the Delta Flyer in Star Trek Voyager, but STV made use of it afterwards. Yeah. I just, again, found it to be very distracting. G-Man, let's see, tag to say there. The Time Machine 2002 with Guy Pearce handled time travel well. I will agree with that. I believe that it's based off of the actual novel of The Time Machine, but yeah, I agree. I thought that time travel was actually handled pretty well in that one too. And again, that's the reason why it depends on what your version of time travel is trying to say is probably what really the difference maker is. Like, for instance, there are problems that we could probably find in Back to the Future, but because of the way in which it handles time travel and views time travel, you have so much fun with it that it doesn't really give you a lot of time to say, wait a minute, this wouldn't work. Whereas with these other shows, you have a lot more time. Nash, what's going on? Valhalla Bound. Nash, what's going on? Welcome. Let's see. Akuris, tag to say, ironically, I completely forgot about that Alien episode. It was the worst. The other one I wasn't a fan of was when they went onto a derelict vessel without biosuits. Rookie mistake. Yeah. That's actually a pretty good point. Geek364, tag to say, Orville recaptures original Trek because each episode this season has real nuance. It gives multiple sides to the discussion and leaves it to the audience to get out what they want. I wholeheartedly disagree with that, Geek Truth. I obviously, I have no frame of reference as far as original Trek, like OG Trek, but I can say very, very clearly that they are not letting it be up to the people. They are not letting it be up to the people to decide. I do not think that is true whatsoever. They are clearly pushing a side. They are very clearly pushing a specific worldview. And any show that pushes that does ultimately leave it up to the viewer, because any show that pushes anything, you have the ability as a viewer to either accept that worldview or to reject that worldview. But to say that they are leaving it up to your own, no, that's not true. They are way too on the nose with their messaging. With all the things that I've mentioned previously, they are very clearly pushing specific ideologies in their shows, in their stories. And that's why, again, I go back to DS9 because that's the only thing that I've had any real experience with being almost, starting the sixth season of the show. And I can say that one leaves you wondering and asking questions and asking whether or not the decisions that they made were correct. That show does it. Again, going back to their time travel episode, Children of Time, there is an actual discussion that they have where they present both sides of the argument. They ultimately make one decision, but it is not a decision that they make that they are fully confident in. I don't think that the Orville is doing the same thing at all. You could say that, Will Mercer does mention that he didn't like the decision at the end, but you have to go back to all the other parts of that episode and to see that he might be saying that and he's giving lip service to it, but that's about all that he's doing, is giving lip service to it. But yeah, I can totally understand previous seasons especially, and parts of episodes having that old Trek feel. I'm not going to deny that one bit, but yeah, I totally disagree with that take, man. 21st Dissident, what's going on? Hail to you. Let's see. Akuris tagged and said, personally, I feel like going back and watching something like the Battlestar Galactica remake felt far more neutral on certain issues. Yeah. And that's I love DS9 as well. I feel like DS9 is just a lot more nuanced. If we're going to talk about nuance, DS9 has a lot more nuance. And I imagine that there's probably a lot of other older sci-fi shows that deal with it in the same way, where there is much more actual nuance. Because to say that Orville is nuanced in any way, I think it's just disingenuous. Because we know what Seth MacFarlane personally believes, and it's very clear that what he personally believes is being put into the show. Not allowing for actual conversation, not allowing for an actual debate, but rather just presenting his specific philosophy on life. Geetru64, I like DS9, love DS9. Orville isn't to that level, but I came out of Orville episode 6 thinking something different than you saw. Episode 4 and 5 had multiple conflicting messages through the plots. But again, what you've just said indicates why there are so many issues that I have with the show, because the conflicting messages there, to me, indicates bad writing. They're not conflicting in the sense of trying to present all sides of an argument and have you decide. It's that they're trying to push various ideas and they're throwing different things out there, and because of the fact that they're conflicting, it causes this disruption of the narrative itself, and the writing just does not actually hold to scrutiny. All those previous episodes from the first 2 seasons, those are episodes that are well written. Those are episodes that I can say I can go back to and rewatch. Right now, there has not been a single episode from this series that I could honestly say I would want to go back and rewatch in any way. Because it's not nuanced, because it doesn't have anything really deeper to it. It tries to be deep, it tries to be deeper philosophical, but because it is so clear in its own position, because Seth MacFarlane is very clear in his own position, it does not have that nuance to it whatsoever. Alice McCarthy, I'm back, just walked to my house 3 times. Nice, dude. Congratulations. Alcuris, what's up? Tagged and said, I mostly love DS9 for Quark, Garrick, and every scene Worf is in. Never forget the baseball episode. Find him and kill him. Again, I'm only beginning season 6, so I've not fully watched it yet, but I am thoroughly enjoying it. And I agree, the characters in DS9 are phenomenal, but the story arcs are there too. Curzilla, what's up, man? Again, last comment, because I do need to head out. Curzilla says, Seth is trying to be the good guy by fence walking a bit, but you can tell what side he leans towards. Exactly. He's trying to be nuanced, but he's not succeeding in doing so. But anyway, so with all that being said, thank you everyone for being in the chat today. This has been a lot of fun, giving my thoughts about the Orville. Again, I think it just is failing in so many different ways. It's not living up to the previous seasons at all, unfortunately. And I really, at this point in the show, can't really recommend it for those that enjoyed the first 2 seasons. Obviously, everyone's going to have a different perspective on things, but I do think that there are objectively problematic elements to the show that just cannot be ignored. It just cannot be ignored. And so I just have to bring that up. Also, we talked about Ms. Marvel being complete and utter trash. And I guess the one last thing, since I already showed you a couple of things where they brought up racism as being the reason why people hate the show. One thing I did want to bring up before heading out, though, just to show you again, go check this out on boundingintocomics.com. Huge shout out to Bounding to Comics and especially to John F. Trent. But here, notice it says, Ms. Marvel co-creator Sana Amanat claims critics of Disney Plus series feel their, quote, identities are being threatened. Yes. So that's the reason why people don't like the show, is because people are racist, because their identity is being threatened. Complete and utter stupidity. Anyway, so thank you all very much for being here today. One thing that I wanted to mention as well is that I am still making those rosaries. Since I am locked out of my main Twitter account, if you are somebody who had originally contacted me on my main Twitter about a rosary, I have no access to that. I have no access to my messages. I did a previous stream on that and went through all the details of it. I do have a new main account. It's at Templar Odin. So again, if you're one of those original persons that wanted one, please just contact me again. If you contacted me through that means, you can also email me as well if you're worried about that Twitter profile being nuked at some point. And also there's other means. Check out the top link in the video description if you want to find out any other ways that you could follow me or contact me as well. But let's just give an example. I was able to make this one right before the stream. So I've got these, and then I've also got corded rosaries as well. Those take a little bit longer, but I definitely like the look of these. And so it's been great to be able to make those while watching these shows, etc. So anyway, thank you all very much for being here. If you want to find out more about the Twitter stuff, check out my previous stream on my other social media platforms. We'll still have those links. They're unlisted, but you'll still have those links on the Discord server, on the on my Minds account, on Gab. I think I have it on Truth Social as well. But anyway, Right News has one comment over on Odyssey. DS9 Dominion War Arc is the best Trek there ever was and ever will be. Hey, I'm right in the middle of it, man, and I'm loving it. So I've not seen the rest to be able to have a comparison, but I can definitely say it is great. So anyway, thank you all so very much for being here. Please make sure y'all smash that like button and light up that fire button before you leave today. Have a wonderful rest of your day. See you tomorrow on the OMB Report. It's my second channel, OMB Report, where we talk about news and politics. And we talk about it for me, I talk about it through my Catholic lens, through a Roman Catholic lens, through a traditional Catholic lens, also through a politically independent lens as well. And we should be able to have some fun discussions tomorrow. So have a wonderful rest of your day, everybody. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge special shout out to my July Patreon Subscribe Star and Locals members at the Keeper of the Bifrost level and above. First starting off with Brandon, let's go Brandon, Chris from the 80s, who you can check out over on YouTube, Garrett Searles, Heimir Ari Hymason, Jeff Toon, Joe Horn, Jonathan Carney, Laura, the Modern Major General Story, Father, Luca Illick, Orange Hat Reviews, who you can also check out over on his YouTube channel as well. Congrats on recently getting to 1,000 subscribers. Rosetta Allen, who you can also find on YouTube as well. Stan Andrian and Miss Martin Muses, who also has her own YouTube channel. Thank you all very much for supporting me over on the platform of Patreon. We also have my Subscribe Star members, Matt317, Storm Tracker, The R, Fast Reaction, John B, Mr. Roy, Glinzer, J. Alice McCarthy Jr., shout out to you, good sir, and continue that awesome recovery that you are doing. Dean Heiss, J-Rod, the Beer Guru, and ZK-Man. ZK-Man, you can find out over and follow him on Twitter as well. And we also have my Locals members. We have of course, the lovely and amazing Minnesota hockey fan. How about a hockey player? UAB UAB Mad Dog, Mike Jackson for the win, and Robert Barnes, as well as Brett D90. Thank you very much. And my last supporter, of course, is the amazing Tina B, Empress of the Universe, one of my mods on the channel. Check out her new show with my other Valkyrie, Stephanie B, on her channel, Tina B's channel, which is called Soup to Nuts. Go check that out because it is pretty awesome and fun content. Anyway, that is going to be it for all of my Keeper of the Bifrost level members and above. If you want your name shout out at the end of every video and live stream, please make sure that you check out the top link of the video description. It is
w.lo, the Willow link, as I like to call it, and you can find my Patreon, Subscribe Star, etc., where you can get not only shout-outs, but also access to an exclusive podcast that I do with John the Flick Pick Flickinger every single month, and also access to giveaways of Blu-rays, 4Ks, etc., all that good stuff. Check that out in the video description. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and as always, God bless.